Okay, I'm going to reconvene the city council meeting. Let's see here. We're going to start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Councilmember Lewis, can you go ahead and lead us in the pledge?
Thank you. Face the flag. 1, 2, 3.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Could you remain standing for the invocation? And tonight's invocation will be presented by VFW Post 9934 Chaplain Maury Hanson.
I can find my notes. Here it is. Thank you. What a beautiful day in Dana Point, isn't it? Really? A little chilly out there, but it's kind of nice. Kind of nice.
Bad days.
What a beautiful day. Yeah. Any day in Dana Point is good.
That's right.
And that's why we all moved here years ago. Well, greetings to all of you beautiful people in our city and all of you other voters who are out here today. I want to thank you, city council members, especially you, the mayor, and all of you staff, and all of you beautiful people that make this country work and this city work so good. And we're so proud to live here. I've been here almost 30 years, and I've seen it before with the city, and I've seen it after the city, and you guys do just a great job. Thank you, every one of you. I've known Robert since he's been here too. I think you're as old as I am, almost.
It's only been here, what, a week?
Well, Lord, we gather here today to say thank you, and we ask for your wisdom and grace to be with this body as they handle the business before today. We ask that all of the citizens of our city come together and express our appreciation for the work that is done, which is behind the scenes, and none of us really get to see. But you provide such great benefits for our happiness, our opportunities, security, and our just overall well-being living in the city of Dana Point. We're honoring some very exceptional students tonight, and they've taken the time and expressing widely what they feel about this great America we all live in. I grant them, and may you grant them, the love and care as they share with us their thoughts and appreciation for here in the United States. Let us all let them know how much we value them. They are our future. Help us lead them a better world that has been given to us for safekeeping. In our Father's name, we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. Please be seated. That brings us to our presentations tonight, and we have two presentations. I believe one of our recipients is not here yet, so we're going to go ahead and start with this is VFW Post 9934 presentations for the Patriot Pen and Voice of Democracy Awards. We'll go ahead and start with our VFW Patriot Pen winner, Sophia O'Keefe. Mr. Yost, if you'd like to come up and introduce her and have her read her essay. Tap it. It should be on.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, City Council, members of staff. I'd like Jack Durish, our Educational Committee Chairman, to join me. Each year, VFW Post 9934 sponsors a series of essay contests for both our high school, which is called the Voice of Democracy, and the middle schools, which are called Patriots Pen. And we make awards to the first, second, and third place selections in each category. This year was very unique for our middle school recipients. All three winners, the first, second, and third place, were all from St. Anne's School. Jack and I had the privilege last Friday of going to a awards assembly, not only for our VFW award presentation, but for honor students in the school. And there were literally hundreds of certificates that were given out for the upper grades for achieving 3.8 grade point average or higher. It was very gratifying to see in this day and age that we have so many students that excel, and I think our whole community can be very proud of all these students and the achievements they've gained. Jack, I'm going to turn it over to you.
The Patriots Pen Award is given to students who write an essay on a given topic This year's topic was why honor the flag, and we always enjoy seeing these things because we get to hear our youth express the same kind of sentiments that we all hold dear. This year, like the commander said, all three winners came from St. Anne's, and Sophia O'Keefe was the first place winner, and she's going to share her essay with us tonight.
You can use the podium if you'd like.
Why I honor the American flag. The Star Spangled Banner is the perfect representation of what America stands for today. Looking up at the flag every morning reminds me of the opportunity and freedom our founding fathers gave us and which our gallant military now protects. As Alvin Olsley once said, that piece of red, white, and blue bunting means 5,000 years of struggle upwards. It is the full-grown flower of ages of fighting for liberty, the century plant of human hope and bloom. From America's history, we have learned about the perilous events that a multitude of people had to endure. In the land of the free and the home of the brave, I have choices. In America, the government provides citizens the free opportunity to learn from kindergarten to 12th grade. Furthermore, we could choose our own religion and education. People from all over the world come to America with hopes for new opportunities. To make America a safer place, roughly 1,281,900 people actively serve in our beloved military, and from their sacrifices, we now have opportunities we did not previously possess. We should always be grateful to those who gave their lives for the sake of others. Although some people disagree with how America's government runs, one should remember those who gave you the right to express that opinion. Knowing that people are here protecting our country from outside forces, natural disasters, and disease helps me sleep peacefully at night. Thankfully, the Stars and Stripes symbolizes America's hard-earned freedoms and natural law. Moreover, these moral principles protect our religious and political beliefs and grant us freedom of speech without negative repercussions. We, the people, can be in unity with our nation without giving up our unalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Clearly, our duty is to protect these rights for future generations and not to take them for granted. In closing, America is a flower still blooming, and it is the epitome of how I see the flag. The Old Glory exemplifies that regardless of our struggles, we can grow to better our country through perseverance.
Thank you, Sophia. On behalf of Dana Point Veterans of Foreign Wars, Post 9934, and our auxiliary, we present you with this Certificate of Achievement for first place in our 2019 Patriots Pen Contest. We've also given Sophia a check for $300. And we'd also like to present you with this Medallion of Achievement. Congratulations.
One more time. One on three. 1, 2, 3.
So you can't get away that fast. Yeah, I'm really excited that St. Anne's did as well as they did. My kids went there, and I understand the level of education. But when you have young kids that truly understand the value of our military and what they've done for us and what they continue to do, and the liberties that they protect and afford to us, it's amazing to see young children truly understand that. So thank you so much. And on behalf of the city of Dana Point, we want to give you a certificate of recognition. Sophia O'Keefe, Veterans of Foreign Wars Patriot Pen Award winner, presented by the City Council of Dana Point in recognition of your being named Veterans of Foreign Wars Post 993 Patriot Pen Award winner. So thank you very much for everything you do, and keep up the good work. just don't put it on eBay because these are hard to come. Okay, so we have one more presentation to do tonight, but the recipient's not here yet, so we're going to go ahead and move on. And when she shows up, we'll go ahead and take a break, and we'll go ahead and award the presentation. So next up is the reading of ordinance titles. Madam Clerk, do we have any?
No, we don't this evening, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Okay, that takes us to the consent calendar. Excuse me. All matters listed under the consent calendar are considered to be routine and will be enacted by one roll call vote. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless members of the City Council, the public, or staff request specific items to be removed from the consent calendar for separate action. Madam Clerk, have anything been removed by the public?
Item number 8.
Okay. Anything by staff?
No, sir.
Thank you. Council, anything?
Item number 7.
Number 7. Okay. I'll move the balance of the calendar.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Oh, okay, that passes unanimously. I'm going to take them in actually numerical order, not how they were pulled. So let's go ahead and take item 7. Ms. Lewis?
Thank you. This is our Dana Point Police Services monthly report, and I'd appreciate hearing from our chief, please.
Of course, thank you. For January of 2019, we're very early into the year, but we have some first-year statistics here. For our Part 1 crimes, we're still down, trending on the downside of in comparison to last year. Those are things like your homicides, your rapes, assault with a deadly weapon. Our Part 2 crimes, if we fast forward to that final page there, our Part 2 crimes are trending upwardly. Once again, those are things that we have an invested part in enforcing, things like our new municipal code citations that we're issuing, various other issues like the driving while intoxicated. We had our traffic unit come out. We did a roving DUI task force there. So we are up on enforcement on Part 2 crimes. Our Part 3 non-criminal statistics are up slightly. Those are things like mental health issues, missing persons, etc. Our traffic summary, we're obviously still up as far as our traffic activity is concerned. Our calls for service for the month of January were up in comparison to the last 2 years. And then, of course, we reintroduced our community service unit via social media to the community. The CSU team is comprised of a sergeant, 3 deputy sheriffs, and 1 crime prevention specialist. That's Jill Jackson. She also works with our volunteers and is doing a big push for volunteerism through police services. They work in partnership with Dana Point Code Enforcement, Parks, Public Works, and other city departments to improve the quality of life for Dana Point residents. They identify and work to solve community problems beyond the scope of normal patrol operations. For example, a field officer would go out and take that initial report, but because he'd be subject to the next call pending, he doesn't necessarily have the time to invest on things like canvassing in the immediate area or making contact with people that he's familiar with a pattern of criminality. Our CSU team has the opportunity to do that because they don't handle calls as assigned. And of course, coordinating with Dana Point Neighborhood Watch and Business Watch programs, including providing information at presentations. And lastly, we've got 2 last little things. Our deputies, Curtis and Swain, located a reported stolen vehicle traveling northbound on PCH Highway in the month of January. They initiated a car stop there, and the vehicle yielded at Circle K parking lot at Violent Lantern. He got assistance from Deputy Mers, who's on our CSU team, Deputy Vanderkrieg, and a K-9 to help make sure that all the efforts were coordinated for a safe outcome. And last but not least, we have a new administrative deputy who was our school resource officer until very recently. And some of the students from St. Edward's Church School visited the deputies to show their appreciation this month. So number 1, welcome Davida. And number 2, goodbye Janik, good luck. And thanks, St. Edwards.
Thank you. Any public comments? Okay. No, not on this one. Go ahead, Ms. Lewis.
Thank you. Just want to say congratulations to Deputy Curtis and Deputy Swain. That was really good work. I had a question on the Part 1 crimes on page 3. So January 2019 and then 2019 year-to-date, and as compared with January 2018 and 2018 year-to-date, is the 2018 year-to-date just through the January, or is it the
Yes.
whole year?
No, that would have just been, the first statistic is just the monthly statistic.
Right.
And the second statistic is the year-to-date statistic. In both cases, since it's only the 1 month, the numbers match.
Okay, so they're both through January. So I had a question on, I guess it would be the assault with deadly weapon. Is that because somebody was pursued, caught, arrested, or, what's the, I noticed it was from 9 in 2019 and 6 in 2018. Is that more deputies patrolling and finding things?
No, assault with a deadly weapon has to be an actual victim reporting that they were assaulted or a witness saying they're observing it.
Okay.
So this would be a number in totality. It doesn't represent prosecution. It just represents reporting.
Okay. And do we know what happened with any of the people who were, I assume they were arrested?
That would not be a safe assumption.
No.
No, these
Okay.
are reports. So in
Oh.
this case, we've had 9 different reports of assault with a deadly weapon within the month.
Okay.
Whether or not those are founded or not founded, or whether prosecution ever actually occurs, I would not be able to speak to that. So
Okay.
we had at least 9 incidents where someone reported or alleged that an assault with a deadly weapon occurred. Now, an assault with a deadly weapon could be anything from somebody stabbing at somebody with a pen aggressively to, depending on where you're striking them, to
Okay.
your large weapons, knives, etc.
Okay. And how do we as a city, if we do, follow up on any of these crimes to tell people what the dispensation is or what the actual facts are? Hey, it was somebody with a pen, not somebody with a
Well, the
an
city
assault
wouldn't.
rifle?
The city wouldn't, because all victims have a right to anonymity. So we would not speak to each individual case, as the victims have a right, as victims of crimes, not to have the information shared if they choose not to.
Okay.
If those victims choose to share that information, they can. And on a case-by-case basis, when it's something that is noteworthy, for example, we had the incident that I posted about on social media last week where the individual discharged a firearm.
Yeah.
When it's something where there's a possibility of immediate panic on the part of the community, or where we're looking for additional information from citizens, I will typically post that on social media, or one of the staff members from police services will.
Okay. I wasn't thinking so much of the names of the people involved, just the, follow-up, what happened, because, when you get to stuff like this, people want to know
Sure.
what happened.
Sure. In each case where there's an allegation of an assault with a deadly weapon or any crime, we have investigators that follow those leads and continue doing interviews, collect video to ascertain whether this is something that we can investigate to the point of prosecution and potentially make an arrest, or whether there's not sufficient information to do so.
Okay. And is that posted somewhere if somebody's interested? Could they go to OCSD or someplace to see what happened with, let's say, robbery January 2019, City Dana Point?
No, ma'am. These are all active criminal investigations or investigations that are going to the DA's office. And therefore, unless there's somebody who is, there's a right to know, need to know. So there's some information that we can share.
Okay.
And when I can, I do. Oftentimes there's an ongoing investigation that I cannot share information about. And in those instances, I wouldn't.
Okay.
If we're contacted by victims or victims' families or witnesses, of course, we reach out to them and get any information that we can. And certainly if there's any danger to the community immediately, we would post that.
Okay, thanks.
Anyone else? Councilmember.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Go.
Just briefly to clarify, Lieutenant Sheehan, You mentioned that we were trending upward, but really, this is just a snapshot of January of this year versus January of last year, correct?
In a snapshot from last year versus this year, the trend is slightly higher. But I would, with the changes in legislation, I think that this is pretty typical of trends across the state.
Right, thank you. So, yeah, not so much a statistical trend, but more this year, in January of this year than January of last year.
Yes.
And on the Part 2 crimes, 17 of those 27 more were drunkenness and driving while intoxicated. So you could argue there probably weren't more drunk people this year, maybe more enforcement.
It's absolutely enforcement. I would think that those individuals that were problem drinkers last year still are.
Probably still around. All right, thank you.
Anyone else? Ms. Lewis, would you like to move the item?
I will move it. I move to accept the report.
Second.
Wow, everybody seconded it. So great. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, passes unanimously. Thank you, Lieutenant Sheehan. What a great report, as always. That brings us to item 8. Do we have staff report?
No, sir, we're available for questions.
Okay, public comments. I have one. Tony Nelson. Please state your name and city of residence, please.
Good evening. My name is Tony Nelson, Capistrano Beach. I read with interest the Doheny Village update submitted as part of this agenda item 8. As you know, Doheny Village has been awaiting revitalization for several decades now. Every election season, we hear candidates saying Doheny Village is their top priority, but there never seems to be a sense of real urgency. Recent beautification plans, though worthwhile, mainly provide lipstick. They will not solve the underlying problems of public safety and homelessness that, per Dana Point survey, are the major concerns of all Dana Point residents. Once-a-month meetings with the Merchants Association, although certainly worthwhile, plus a suspended EIR, are not exactly a fast track on this project. I recognize that Doheny Village is now in District 3, but it shares a common history and strong connection with Capistrano Beach and will always be part of 92624. We were saddened to see that our one distinct community of interest was the only one torn apart by the council majority as they determined districts. Nonetheless, the 6,000 plus people who reside in Capo Beach would love to one day do our household shopping and seek restaurants and entertainment in the village rather than San Clemente and elsewhere. A revitalized commercial area will add significant tax revenue to Dana Point and help curb crime and vagrancy that affects our entire city. We understand that the council's main focus continues to be the almost completed Lantern District, but we have no doubt that staff and council can handle this project too. I urge you to consider 4 things which I think will move us a little closer on this vital project. First, speed up the rezoning process as much as possible and bring the new plan to the community and the CCC sooner rather than later. Let's just move a little faster. Number 2, move forward on concrete plans to establish connectivity to Doheny Beach. This one element will provide public beach access, enhance revenue for local businesses, and ensure the success of this commercial zone. 3, immediately establish funding for new lighting throughout the district. We need this to improve public safety and also aesthetics. Number 4, task police services with devising a comprehensive plan to cut crime and vagrancy in this area. Council and residents have repeatedly suggested a satellite station and other efforts, but council has never assigned this task to our very competent chief. We love Lieutenant Margie. We know she can come up with a plan for this area. Please consider adding these 4 items to the very appreciated beautification efforts already underway. Let's make some meaningful progress on Doheny Village. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Nelson. Any comments from council?
Yes.
Go ahead.
I have a question probably for staff on the Greer project. I assume that's the Lantern District update on the Del Prado. Is that project?
Yeah, let me get to that page in your report.
I'm on page 1, agenda report.
That's correct.
Okay, so I saw that it's got, I guess it would be story polling, and it's got the flags up there for the height, is that correct?
That's correct.
Is that the height, because I noticed it was straight across, so I was looking at Raintree, and Raintree has some areas that are higher than the 3 stories. I assume that's gonna be elevators, things like that?
You're referring to the Raintree as opposed to the.
Yeah, I kind
Sorry.
of switched on you. Okay, so Raintree, I was looking at that. They have it framed for the 18 feet and then the 2 top levels. But on top of that, there is at least one area that went above that, is framed above that. Is that elevator or something?
I couldn't speak to that anecdotally because it's obviously under construction and changing daily, and I haven't seen. I don't know the current condition that you're referring to, but it most likely is a mechanical or some kind of elevator overrun that you're referring to based on the description.
Okay, so I asked that on the Greer project, because does the story polling take into effect those sorts of heights, so that the height of the flags, is that the absolute maximum height of that building in all places?
I'd have to refer to the story polling plan itself, but it was reviewed by the project planner and staff to ensure that it met the requirements. I can't recall whether that includes capturing mechanical apparatus that could be another, I believe it's 42 inches above the maximum height. I just couldn't speak to that anecdotally, but the story polling for sure covers the maximum height of the building.
Okay. So, and does somebody certify that in the city that the story polling is accurate and meets the requirements of
That's
Measure A
correct.
story
And
polling?
it's literally just been submitted today, so I haven't had the benefit of reviewing that, but there is a certification process.
Okay, and how long does that stay up? Through the appeal process?
It's a minimum of 20 days based on the development standards.
Okay, and I assume it's going to planning commission?
It's tentatively scheduled for March 11th.
Okay, so it'll be through the planning commission and then maybe an appeal period after that?
That's correct.
Okay.
Although I don't believe the development standards require it to be maintained after planning commission hearing, so it'd be at the owner's discretion whether they wanted to remove it or not,
Okay,
pending a possible appeal.
okay. And then I have a question on the Doheny Village update, where it says that the, let's see, the beautification plans specific to Doheny and suspend work authorized by the council for the Doheny plan update EIR. That was the form-based code EIR that we suspended?
That's correct.
Let's see. And it says community members evaluate and recommend draft zoning code amendments for existing and proposed development standards. Could you tell people what is the process for community members to learn about the draft zoning codes and how they can have input into that?
Absolutely. So we've been meeting on a monthly basis with a group of stakeholders. They're publicly held meetings here in the Public Works conference room in the evening. They're generally attended by, I would say, 15 to 20 property owners, interested residents on a monthly basis. We've systematically broken the village up into different areas geographically and gone through area by area. And first, we were focused on the uses that the community wanted to see allowed in those specific areas. And we systematically worked our way through from the railroad tracks all the way essentially over to the other side of the village. And then more recently, at our last meeting, we switched over to development standards. And again, we started back near the railroad track side of the village. We work incrementally through each section, but development standards would be everything from setbacks, height, et cetera. We've deferred conversation on parking because we want to work through the whole plan before we have a more global conversation on parking as well. And each meeting, I would estimate there's there's a fair amount of staff work leading into the prep for each meeting, and obviously action items that come out. So it's not simply a one-off meeting a month. There's a considerable amount of effort going into working on this project.
Are those meetings on the same day of the week? I mean, like once a month on the third Tuesday like ours, or what is
It's not a standing date, and that was based on a request of when we initially started this working group, because schedules changed, different holidays fall on different dates. So generally, we take sort of a straw poll at the preceding meeting to check on people's availability, and we establish a date and then schedule it for the following month.
Okay, so how do members of the public know what date?
We actually maintain on our website. There's a Doheny Village. There's information on the community development website. Anyone could contact myself directly through email or phone, or Belinda Dinez. She's the project planner and can get them on the list.
Okay, and are the materials that the city puts together, is that available to public as well?
It is.
Okay. Is it possible to make announcements at council? Hey, the next meeting will be at such and such a date, and it's here in the council chambers?
We generally meet in the Public Works Conference Room.
Public Works Conference room. Since it's not a standing meeting, is that possible so anybody listening can hear?
Absolutely.
Okay. Let's see. Oh, then I had a question on the short-term rental update. Maybe this is a city manager question. I see it said we had a survey that was designed by the subcommittee, not a survey firm like we usually do. We usually have FM3 and it's scientific and all that. Are we planning on doing one for short-term rentals?
No,
And why not?
we've already done one.
Well, we did a survey, but this wasn't like a scientific survey that was.
There were a number of questions on the last FM3 survey that did address short-term rentals. I can get the council another copy of those responses if you'd like to see those. If the council wants to direct an additional separate survey through FM3 like they did for the specific issue of council districting, certainly the council could direct that. I'd recommend you put that as a part of the budget process.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Lewis. Any other questions? Okay, a couple things that came up here. The connectivity issue, that is being addressed right now. I sit on OCTA. We actually had the CEO of OCTA come down and the chief operating officer to take a look at some options. Councilmember Federico and I and the city manager and Matt Sitakori. We were all down there taking a look at this. So this is actually in the works right now, trying to figure out how to get down there. If you weren't aware of this, OCTA actually manages the right-of-ways along the railroad tracks, and we're taking a look at some options down there and how we can get over to the beach. So just so you know, that's going on currently. And the divided community piece of Capo Beach, that was something that happened, and I'm gonna let the city attorney correct me if I get this wrong. But when we had to go to districting, you have to population balance the districts, and Capo Beach could, if all of Doheny Village was included in there, they would have been far out or overpopulated compared to the other districts. So anyway, so that I believe that was one of the issues in trying to get the population weighting, correct?
I believe that was, well, not I believe, I can tell you that the population balancing was an important issue that had to be taken into consideration during that whole discussion. And I if I'm not mistaken, I think that the ultimate map that was selected was approved on a unanimous vote.
It was. Thank you.
I have
Okay.
one more question, please. When is the next meeting of that Doheny group?
I don't have the date available, but I'll make sure it's posted on the website and included on the next development update.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'll go ahead and move this item.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
All right, that passed unanimously. We will be moving on to item 11. Or I'm sorry.
Public comments, Mr.
I
Mayor?
went a little too far. We're going to go to public comments now. There will be a 3-minute time limit per person and an overall time limit of 30 minutes for this public comments portion of the agenda. At the mayor's discretion, the balance of public comments will be heard after the new business portion of the agenda. All comments are to be directed to the city council and shall not consist of any personal attacks Members of the public are expected to maintain a professional, courteous decorum during their comments. State law prohibits the city council from taking action on a specific item unless it appears on the posted agenda. One other thing I'd like to add is if you're here to speak about a specific agenda item, go ahead and make your comments there. If you have something that's not on the agenda, you want to make those comments now, please go ahead under the public comments. Madam Clerk, I see we have some. Okay, we have, first up will be Betty Hill, then Wayne Yost, and then Carol Kelly. Please state your name and city of residence.
Betty Hill, Capistrano Beach. In a recent letter in the Dana Point Times, Mr. Killebrew defended his budgeting practice where the council approves millions in deficit spending that result in huge differences year after year when compared to actual results. And he calls this approach conservative. The latest budget in OpenGov shows a $6.4 million deficit for the year ending this June. A letter by Mr. Hill, a retired CEO, recommends an established business approach where the city's budgets are a management tool to measure performance, track revenue, monitor capital contracts, and provide ongoing comparisons of actuals to the budget. The subject in both letters was the audited FY 2018 Comprehensive Annual Financial Report, ending June 30th, 2018, but just released in January 2019. The numbers in the CAFR are not in dispute. The audit, Mr. Denny, does not deal with budget policy or accuracy. The CAFR showed that while the final budget approved in April 2018 was for a $5.6 million deficit, the final result 3 months later in June was a surplus of $2.6 million and a difference between the budget and actual results of over $8 million. That huge difference is for a 3-month period when actual results would have been available for the prior months. Is that budgeting conservative or irresponsible? Mr. Killebrew ends his letter by using the surplus achieved as justification for his budgeting approach. But as page 86 in the FY 2018 CAFR shows, deficits have occurred from 2009 to and including 2017, except 2014 when City Parkland was sold, or it also would have had a deficit. As a consequence and evidence of those deficits, the city's spendable cash dropped precipitously. So it is up to the council to decide which budgeting approach fulfills its responsibility to provide oversight of the city's finances, to follow the money, and to improve the council's ability to make informed spending decisions. Which approach best recognizes problems sooner rather than too late for sound financial management? But most importantly, which will run the city responsibly and efficiently to benefit Dana Point's residents? For the record, I am submitting copies of all the referenced documents. In addition, there is a copy of a letter responding to Mr. Denny's irresponsible attack at the January 15th City Council meeting, and a report on the huge differences in the budgets to actual results with data from the CAFRs. Thank you. And I have copies of all of that for the record and for each of you, with all the data. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Hill. Wayne Yost.
Wayne Yost, 36-year resident of Dana Point. I'm going to take off my VFW hat for a minute and speak as a private citizen. And with the council's permission, I would like to read a letter to the editor in last Friday's Dana Point Times. It was authored by Bev Jorgensen, Dana Point Chamber of Commerce Executive Director. Dear editor, the Dana Point Chamber of Commerce is very proud of our city, which the Government Finance Officers Association of the United States and Canada awarded a Certificate of Achievement for Excellence in Financial Reporting for its comprehensive annual financial report for the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2016. The Certificate of Achievement is a prestigious national award recognizing conformance with the highest standards for preparation of state and local government financial reports. In order to be rewarded a Certificate of Achievement, a government unit must publish an easily readable and efficiently organized comprehensive annual financial report whose contents conforms to the program standards. Such CAFR must satisfy both generally and accepted accounting principles and applicable legal requirements. A certificate of achievement is valid for a period of 1 year only. The city of Dana Point received a certificate achievement, listen to this, for 28 consecutive years, fiscal year 1989 through 2016. A city that receives this achievement for 28 years is a city we can all be proud of. We commend the city of Dana Point on their conservative budgeting. The Chamber champions businesses, prosperity, and economic vitality, and look forward to working with our businesses and community in a city that is well-run, uses a conservative budgeting approach. We are Dana Point. Job well done, City of Dana Point. It goes on, but I'm going to stop there. I'm now going to put my VFW hat on. I have 2 events to announce. This Friday, we are holding a flag retirement ceremony at Doheny State Beach, 4 o'clock in Section A, which is just shortly after you go through the gate to the right by the green canopies. For those people who wish to retire flags or just attend the ceremony, there will be no park entry fee. Just notify the guards at the gate. You're welcome to bring your worn or tattered flags to be retired with dignity and respect. Also, we have upcoming very shortly on the 2nd of March, the Festival of the Whales Parade. For those who have not attended, it's a beautiful parade. It starts at 10 o'clock a.m. at Strands Beach and winds through downtown Dana Point on Pacific Coast Highway. And I would ask all of our citizens and their families to attend. It's a great family-friendly event. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Yost. Carol Kelly. And then after Ms. Kelly, we'll have Hoyen Ip and finally Julian Joshua.
Good evening. My name is Carol Kelly. I'm in District 4, Santa Clara. I have a question about the parking task force. I understand your report is due in March, and I've had a lot of people in my neighborhood that have asked me about the report or what the content will be or when it's out and if it will be on the website. One of the questions is, I know the survey said that they didn't think there were any problems with parking, but then again, that we're doing development quite rapidly, and it's only once the developers come and the retail comes in that the parking problems will start. So it's better to plan before the crisis starts. So what I'd like to see in the report is how many private lot owners have you contacted per date? Not that you've contacted them 2 years ago, but per date, how many private lot owners have you contacted to be willing to let the city lease the lot or the public use the lot for parking? And how many developers have you contacted? Maybe not the ones that are in now, but in the future for parking and to arrange contracts with them. I'd like to see that. On another thing is the city's done an excellent job with the trolley. Everybody loves the trolley. But I was wondering, maybe the city manager could tell me, is there going to be a connection between Beach Road to San Clemente? That would be a popular spot this summer to have that connection. So that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kelly. And to answer that question, they're planning to connect those 2 trolleys. I don't know exactly where the connection is going to be made, but those 2 trolleys are supposed to connect. Thank you. Hoyen Ip.
Good evening, Hoyen Ip, Dana Point trash picker. I was here the night the consultant talked about the community survey. I was surprised that the least satisfied service was storm drain maintenance to keep the beaches clean. I mean, people have no idea how much more Dana Point spends on that than other cities. So I think we hit a point that both sides need to step up. The city and the public. Me too. So most of you know, I have been nagging countywide on trash reduction at the source. Most of the time, nobody wanted to listen to me. So last summer, media started to report some of my activities, and a big restaurant owner supported the campaign. Then Newport Chamber made these signs for us to hand to restaurants: serve on request, bring your own. So on Newport City property, there's a very popular coffee shop. They took 2 of these and put them up. So I guess at that point for the city was seeing was believing. So as soon as the city was done with the election and the recount, they started to work on this stuff. So you got a handout. This is the stuff they hand out to restaurants and the signs. Last week, the Water Quality Councilman Hertman announced at the City Council that we are working on municipal codes. Suddenly, I became popular. I got 2 interviews and 2 talks lined up. I think that just means that plastics, the change the public has been waiting for in terms of government action, whoever takes the lead is going to look good. Dana Point, I think if the city could address that, that could be our response to the public that we are willing to do more for cleaner beaches. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ip. I see Ms. Jorgensen's here from the chamber. I don't know if you've worked with her working with the restaurants about getting that information out to them and possibly doing something similar to what Newport did, but that might be a good place to start, and we'll take a look at it as well. Thanks. Julian Joshua.
Thank you. Good evening. Julian Joshua, Dana Point, resident of Monarch Beach. On numerous occasions, I've asked you in the council during public comments to consider the adoption of a non-discriminatory ordinance to regulate group homes, including those with 6 or fewer residents, and to impose a buffer zone. That has always met with silence or pushback. Recently, a jury verdict was obtained by the city of Costa Mesa in Santa Ana, in federal court in Santa Ana, which upheld in every single respect the non-discriminatory ordinance that had been adopted by that city. It's important to note that the ordinance was specifically designed to be to maintain the residential quality of neighborhoods, and that was deemed to be in the interests both of neighbors and of the residents of the homes concerned. I understand that verdict is going to be or has been appealed, I'm not sure what the status is, to the Ninth Circuit. And I would urge you to do a number of things. First of all, to coordinate with your neighboring cities to come up with a common strategy to deal with a common problem. Secondly, to exchange information with them regarding their experiences. And thirdly, to instruct your city attorney to file an amicus brief in the Ninth Circuit supporting your fellow city. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Joshua. Any other public comments?
No, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, I'll go ahead and close the public comment section. And that brings us to public hearings. We don't have any tonight. And now we're at unfinished business. And that's item 11, adoption of a resolution of the Dana Point City Council establishing a policy of lighting public spaces from private property. Mr. City Manager, do you have a staff report?
Yes, Matt Senacore's got a staff report for you tonight.
Good evening, council members. Just briefly, the staff report kind of tells the whole story, but I wanted to talk this evening about a resolution that's in front of you to consider a policy on lighting public spaces from private property. The City Council, as you recall, has previously approved this investment in the past, and staff at your direction has implemented it, particularly in the Doheny Village, with great success. We were able to light some pretty dark sidewalks and improve the look on Doheny Park Road. We have identified the need to memorialize the program and would like to allow some flexibility to apply this inexpensive solution to enhance public safety to other areas of the city. It's also important to note that the resolution addresses some potential conflict with other existing policies that exist today and could be developed in the future. Both the city manager and myself are available for questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Senacore. Do we have any public comments? Thank you. We have one public comment tonight. Tony Nelson. Item 11. Do you have one for her on number 13, or should I hold this? Okay. All right. I'll close the public comments and bring it back to council.
Nothing for me, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, do we have a motion to discuss this? I'll move the item.
I'll second for sake of discussion.
Thank you. Ms. Lewis?
Okay, I did have one question. Okay, so I'm looking at the resolution on the back of it, page 4. Okay, so it says, once the agreement is processed, does that mean signed? What's processed?
Signed, yes.
Okay.
By both parties.
Okay, so once the agreement, and then I see that is going to be put, or at least the agreement will be recorded on the property. How about it says that the owner, let's see, we put in the lighting, right, at our expense. We buy the lights, we put in the lighting. The owner of the property then is going to maintain it in perpetuity. Is there something, is that agreement that says right of entry agreement, does that have in there that the property owner is going to maintain the lights in perpetuity?
Yes, Ms. Lewis, all of the things that you see in this resolution would be memorialized in every agreement that's processed.
Okay, so that agreement then gets recorded on the property deed so that anybody purchasing or acquiring that property will have the obligation, legal obligation, continuing to, in perpetuity, maintain those lights.
That's correct.
Okay. I think, I did have one question maybe for the city attorney. Item 3, paragraph 3, once the agreement is processed, the lighting is to be installed. It would be purchased and installed at the city's expense and be connected to a private property power source. And then it says to the satisfaction of the private property owner. So I'm not sure what that means, the private property power source and satisfaction to the owner. I mean, that's all part of this agreement, right?
It's all part of the agreement. This is a kind of in the field sort of an issue, but what that language means is that we're going to connect it to, if it's at your house, to your power source, and we're going to work with you to find a way to do it that's satisfactory to you. And I presume that those kinds of details will be worked out in advance, so we're not, in the middle of a project trying to figure out what we're going to do.
And this comes into being when a private property owner requests us to do something, right? So it's going from property owner to us versus us to the property. So assumedly, we're already in discussions before we get to this point, right?
Well, yeah, this is a voluntary program. We're not forcing on anybody. If somebody comes to us and wants it, then we work with them to make it happen.
Okay. And this is for anybody in the city or businesses? Who is this for?
Yes, this would expand it to anyone in the city.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Vixort?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I support this concept, and I understand the need to memorialize it. I'll be voting in favor of this item.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem White?
Just one comment here. I think that getting it on, on the books as an ordinance will be helpful as we look forward. We continue to look at ways to move power poles underground, and every time we remove power poles or any other poles, we remove a place to put light public space from. So I think the need will grow as we do certain things. So having a technique to be able to provide lighting in public spaces based on the property that's left dark, especially in alleys where we take poles out, putting new poles up just to hold lighting doesn't really accomplish very much. So I think this is an ordinance we should support.
Thank you. Okay. I support this ordinance. I understand the need for it. Just a little follow-up. I hope we're not pulling poles down and then coming back saying we're going to put lighting on your property. I understand we can underground the utility and leave the pole. So hopefully that's a decision we're making as we start to discuss underground utilities when we get there. So, okay, I'm going to go ahead and call for the vote. All right, that passes 5-0. Thank you very much. That brings us to item number 12.
Matt Schneider has your staff report.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, council members. The item before you is a request to execute contracts with West Coast Code Consultants and CSG Consultants to supplement the city's building permit plan check services. These contract services are required due to the continued high demand for building permits in the city. Our current in-house staff levels are established to cover normal workloads, with contractors utilized to cover peak demands. These contracts are essentially as-needed contracts and utilized based on plan check service demand. City staff continuously monitors building permit activity levels through a number of data sources and can suspend or terminate these contracts at any time should there be a drop in demand. In terms of fiscal impact, these contracts are funded through the collection of plan review fees paid by the applicant during the building permit process. The contract receives a percentage of the fees, while the city retains about a third of the fees collected to offset administrative and overhead costs. Additional charges for reviews and revisions to approved plans, basically changes requested by the applicant after permits are issued, are based on an hourly rate and fully paid by the applicant on an as-needed basis. With that, again, staff is requesting direction to execute the contracts, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, any public comment on this item?
No, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, I'll close the public comment, bring it back to council. Do we have a motion? I'll move the item.
I'll second.
Okay. Mr. Federico, do you have any comments?
No comments. I think it's
Ms. Lewis?
straightforward.
Yeah, I have a couple of comments. Okay, so the user fees, the user of the services, who gets the plan checks, things like that, they pay all these fees, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And I know those fees are going up, so in a couple of years, it will be 100% recovery, is that correct?
Well, in these cases, as Mr. Schneider mentioned in his staff report, the applicant pays the fee, and this service provider receives 70% of that fee, and the city keeps the remaining 30%. So the contractor works for 70% of our fee.
I got that, but doesn't the permit applicant, ultimately, however we divide it, it's immaterial to the permit applicant,
They
doesn't
pay it all. Nobody else
They pay it
does.
all. So we don't, I mean, theoretically, when we get to our user fee limit, this will all be reimbursed to the city, right?
It is all reimbursed.
Oh,
to
it
the
is
city.
now?
Absolutely.
So, okay, so then
The user is the only one that pays in this
Okay.
equation.
So then I guess I'm a little confused. It says fiscal impact, that we need to, maybe I'm reading this wrong, increase the budget. The current budget is $342,000. Current monthly running cost for contracted plan check and inspection. And there's a need to request an increase.
Correct. You have to have budget authority to be able to pay against the contract.
Okay, so we pay it up front, or at least we budget, we pay it.
The applicant puts funds on deposit with the city.
Okay.
And then they are charged fees based on the plan review and the building inspections that then get taken from that deposit.
Okay.
But in order for us to pay the contractor for that work, we have to have budget authority to do that. And the workload has been such that we've seen a need for an increase in that total budget authority. It will be offset by the revenue collected by the applicants.
So the budget authority is to spend the money sitting in an account that they deposit?
Correct.
Okay. So then it says, it is requested that a budget adjustment of $108,000 be made to the building division budget.
Correct.
And that's for,
to pay for the increased amount of work that they've been seeing at the building counter.
but that 108 is sitting in an account and that will be reimbursed to us.
It will be, we're estimating that it will be.
Okay, so,
If people stop coming to the building counter tomorrow, we'll have more budget authority than we'll need, but we won't use it because they're not coming to the counter.
okay. It said the vast majority of these services are 100% paid by the applicant, but I'm hearing they're all paid by the applicant?
Yes, there's certain unique circumstances where in the case of an inspection, they could receive a city building inspector instead of a contracted building inspector. And in that case, as you mentioned, our building fees are going up over a phased 3-year period, but they're not currently recovering all the cost for our in-house building inspectors. So that would be the case where it doesn't actually get covered.
Okay, but it says there will be no subsidized plan check or inspection fees once the schedule increases. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lewis. Mr. Vixork.
No questions, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Wyatt.
No, I went through with Mr. Denny to make sure I understood how the money allocated and flowed and recognized that we can't actually sign these contracts without budget approval. And we need the contracts in case we need to pull the servers. So I think it makes good sense for us to do it.
Thank you. Mr. Denny, I'm going to ask you a question I asked you earlier. Just this is more for clarification for the public. When you look at this chart on page 2, it shows fiscal year 16 building plan checks were 1351. Fiscal year 17 it went to 1091, and fiscal year 18 went to 1030. If you just read these numbers in the chart, it would make it look like our need is going down. Could you explain why we're asking for a budget increase?
So in the paragraph below that chart, it does mention that we have begun implementing in fiscal 17 what are called combo permits, combination permits, where one permit covers a multitude of trades, so electric, plumbing, HVAC, mechanical. And so what used to be, potentially 3 permits is now 1 permit. But the key metric to look at is if you look at the valuation, both the total building valuation and the valuation per permit, and you see those numbers continue to grow, which really demonstrate the complexity of the projects that they're dealing with.
Okay. Thank you very much. I just want to make sure the public understood that when we're asking for something that looks like our need is going down.
Thank you.
And so I want to make sure everybody understood that. Okay. Thank you very much for your report. It was very thorough. Let's go ahead and vote. And that passes 5-0. Thank you. Who gave the staff report on that one? Mr. Schneider, thank you so much. All right, that brings us to item 13. Madam Clerk, do we have public comments? Thank you. All right, Ms. Nelson, I'm gonna let you go first since I already had yours on the desk. We'll go Ms. Nelson, Kim, is that Kim Tarantino? It's all right, thank you. You'll be second, Rick Brown third.
My apologies on the number mix-up. Good evening, my name is Tony Nelson, Capistrano Beach. As you know, Dana Point residents are still adjusting to the reality of our recent move to district elections. Voting rights for every citizen changed drastically, from the right to vote for all 5 council members to now only 1. And worse, when council chose the 3 districts that could vote in 2018, the majority chose districts 1 and 2 for incumbents Mueller and Vixorek, but singled out Capistrano Beach, which also had a resident incumbent, and denied us an equal right to vote. This disenfranchisement saddened and angered us. We're hopeful that our new council members will demonstrate their promises to represent all districts by instilling fairness into the Planning Commission selection process. Dana Point is almost completely built out. Most major new development is most likely to occur in Districts 4 and 5, Lantern District and Capitol Beach. Members of the current acknowledged council majority do not represent these districts. They live in and answer to voters only in districts 1, 2, and 3. We can't vote for you. It is likely that major development decisions in Dana Point will be made in the next 4 years, the same term as the new planning commissioners. Under current policy 302, 3 new planning commissioners will be chosen by council members who live outside districts 4 and 5. Those who are most negatively impacted by the parking, building heights, density, and traffic that sometimes accompany development will have no representation and no recourse. Because districts 4 and 5 residents can neither vote for nor even recall Mr. Mueller, Vixoric, or Federico, they will have no council member accountable to them for their choices of planning commissioner. I propose that you change policy 302 so that each council person is allowed to nominate 1 planning commissioner subject to council approval. This is both fair and reasonable and fulfills the promise made to all of us when the new council was sworn in. While power will still be retained by the majority, obviously, this policy change would ensure that District 4 and 5 residents and all future minority districts will at least be heard, will have a voice, and will be represented on this important commission. I urge you to do the right thing by all the residents of Dana Point, whether we can vote for you or not. This democratic and equitable policy change would demonstrate your respect for all of us, all citizens of Dana Point, regardless of where they reside. I believe this could go a long way toward healing the division foisted on all of us by the CVRA. Dana Point could use some unity. Let's do the right thing here. Thank you.
All right, Ms. Tarantino.
I'm Kim Tarantino. I've been a resident in Dana Point for 25 years, 14 of those in Capistrano Beach. And I'm here requesting that policy 302 be changed to allow for fair citywide representation. So similar to what Ms. Nelson had just proposed. So currently, as you all know, every city council member represents a specific district. And if the intent of districting was to prevent minority vote, or excuse me, minority vote dilution, then it seems like the Planning Commission model should follow that same model. And there would be a member from each district. So for example, if we don't do that, you might have District 1, 2, 3, and 5. And they decide on the slate of people who would be on the Planning Commission, yet the development happens in District 4. They have no voice. So policy 302 was designed when the city council members were voted upon by a different set of rules. Those rules have changed. Policy 302 should also be changed to be consistent with the intent of districting. So our goal would be fair representation for all Dana Point citizens. So thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you, Ms. Tarantino. Mr. Brown, followed by Carol Kelly and Julian Joshua.
Mr. Mayor, City Council, staff, my name is Rick Brown. I'm a 35-year resident of Dana Point. Been here longer than the city's been a city. I watched the city grow. I remember when this building was made. I remember when Golden Lantern was a dead end and we used to race soapbox derbies down it. Seen a lot of changes. I'm just here to support the people here who think the Planning Commission should also be established the same as the City Council is by district. It's only fair. The citizens would appreciate that. I think it also gives each member of the City Council a better voice, and it gives the citizens someone they can look and talk to if they're not happy with it. That would basically be my position. I hope you guys look forward to at least discuss it. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Kelly?
My name is Carol Kelly. I live in the Lantern District, homeowner on Santa Clara Avenue. I'm in agreement with Tony Nelson and the other speakers. Please amend Policy 302 to state that all City Council members will appoint a planning commissioner to represent their district. In addition, since most of the future development will occur in Districts 4 and 5, there should be at least 2 members of the Planning Commission from these districts. That's all we're asking. We're asking where the development is. We need a representative. Current Policy 302 appoints planning commissioners at large, not by districts. For example, all commissioners could reside in the same neighborhood with little representation in other areas of the city. The Dana Point Planning Commission in 2015 denied the Majestic Rain Tree's request for a variance on their 7-lot development on Del Prado. The Dana Point City Council, including current council members Mueller and Visoric, fired the entire planning commission and replaced them, even though some planning commissioner terms had not yet expired. The city council then reversed the planning commission's ruling. Therefore, in order to alleviate excessive removal from office and promote a smooth transition team, I recommend that commissioners be appointed by the districts they represent. Districts 4 and 5 are where the majority of the development is taking place. The council majority does not live in these districts. Commissioners need to live in the districts where development is taking place and be appointed by the council members who are elected by that district. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Joshua.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Julian Joshua, I live in Dana Point. Under Policy 302, the members of the Planning Commission are appointed or removed by affirmative vote of at least 3 council members. In practice, this means the current majority bloc. The 3 members of the majority represents districts 1, 2, and 3. However, as we've heard, almost all the most important development projects that will come before the Commission in the next few years are located in Lantern District and Capo Village, and that's districts 4 and 5. And incidentally, before I made this intervention, I didn't coordinate or speak to any of the other speakers. The move to districting requires a complete overhaul of Policy 302 for 2 reasons. The first we've dealt with already, the fairness aspect. I won't go over that in any detail except to say that it's paradoxical that those who are most affected will have no voice in the planning process. The second argument is what I would call the Caesar's wife proverb. Those of you you may, of course, all be familiar with the proverb, Caesar's wife must be above suspicion. The current majority were elected in large part thanks to the $70,000 plus in contributions from unaccountable and unidentified PACs formed by anonymous real estate interests, including the California Real Estate PAC, which probably gives a clue as to what their interests are. We don't know who the individuals are who are standing behind those PACs. It's quite likely they are not even residents of Dana Point, let alone of the most affected districts. Nor is it beyond the realms of possibility that they have an interest in upcoming real estate projects in Dana Point that will be coming before the Commission. For there to be public confidence in the planning process, it is vital to avoid any possibility, appearance, or suggestion of impropriety or conflict of interest in the workings of the Commission. So not only must justice be done, it has to be seen to be done. I urge the Council to amend Policy 302 so as to have each council member nominate a member of the Planning Commission. Thank you.
Thank you. Any additional public comments?
No, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, I'll close the public comment section and bring it back to the council. Do I hear a motion?
Yes, I will motion. I will motion that we change implementation, how Policy 302 is implemented from council majority to each council member nominates a planning commissioner from the pool of residents who have applied to be a planning commissioner. and that be subject to approval by the council.
Okay, any seconds?
I will second it for purposes of discussion.
Okay. This is your item. Ms. Lewis, you can go ahead and start.
Thank you. Well, as everybody knows, that Dana Point is now divided into 5 separate districts. So each district is going to have different issues, different needs, different wants, and that may very well compete with one another from time to time. Each district's council member has different priorities, different goals, as determined by the residents that elected that district council member. As has been noted, it is more fair and representative if the planning commission represents the needs and the wants of each of the various districts. And the most efficient way to do that is to have each council member nominate a member of the planning commission from the pool of residents who have applied. The planning commission holds a lot of power and discretion. Municipal Code 9.05130 requires development to be, and I quote, compatible with and will complement and enhance the subject and surrounding properties, considering architectural style and detailing, massing and bulk, color and materials, and scale and proportion. As we know, different people look at this subjective test differently. The code incorporates the urban design element guidelines and requires the Planning Commission to use them. A stated goal of the urban design element is, quote, preserve the individual positive character and identity of the city's communities. Well, who can speak better for the character and identity of a district's community than the council person who is elected by the residents of each district? The Planning Commission should mirror the council's makeup. The council is made up of 5 people elected from 5 different districts by the residents of that district. And the Planning Commission should mirror that and be accountable to the people of the district. And the only way they could be accountable to the people of the district is through the voters of that district. And since the voters only get to indirectly vote for a planning commission, it's important that the person who is elected as their city council member be their voice for who reflects their taste in the subject and surrounding properties, who reflects the district's architectural style, massing, does it fit in with the character of the neighborhood, and who is accountable to those residents if the planning commission that has been chosen does not accurately reflect the values of that community. Each commissioner should be accountable to the residents through the one elected person that they have left now. It used to be that all 5 of us were accountable to the city, so we were all accountable to who was on the planning commission, but that is no longer the case. Everybody votes now for one person, and your voice in your district has to go indirectly through that one person. So let's follow the example, recent example, as a matter of fact, just their last meeting of Costa Mesa. So Costa Mesa, like us, was at large. And with this last election, they just changed from at large to districting. And as their city council had to appoint people to the planning commission, they changed their policy to selecting the planning commissioners by having each city council member nominate somebody for the planning commission, and then that was subject to the plan's approval. As has been noted, this process is fair, and it gives each district an equal voice, and more importantly, it is, as we have all said we are going to do through our election, put our residents first. Well, this is how to put residents first, because this is how residents' voice is heard through their vote, and this is the only vote that residents have left. So I would ask that this council just changed the implementation of the policy of the Planning Commission, each commissioner, to a nomination by each city council member of someone in their district from the pool of candidates who have applied, subject to the majority's approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Federico.
I have quite a few questions, but I'll try to limit it to what. So, what would the approval be, Ms. Lewis?
The approval would be, so you would nominate someone from your district from the pool that we get. We interview, from the pool, you nominate, and then the council can say yes or no to that specific individual that you would like to see, versus the 3 people picking the 5 that they want.
Okay, I think I understand what you're saying. I don't see how it changes the outcome. I am interested in what if, I mean, the Planning Commission is really about qualifications, objectivity, and the ability to evaluate a project based on our codes and our ordinances, some of which you outlined objectively. And I personally don't believe that you need to live in a specific part of town to do that objectively. But what if no one from District 3 who seems qualified applies?
If no one from a district seems qualified to apply, then that person has the right to nominate someone else. It doesn't have to be from that district, but the preference would be from that district. But if nobody applies who is qualified, then it would be it would behoove that particular council member to pick someone who is qualified. But again, that council member is now accountable to their voters. And if that person that they have nominated does not reflect the compatibility, the subjective element, that it has to be compatible, that it's style, detail, massing, bulk, color, all of these urban element designs that, are different. People in Monarch, have a different view than people in Lantern. People in Monarch live behind gates and with HOAs. And, I saw that with the story polling when I brought that to the Planning Commission. A lot of those planning commissioners lived in HOAs, and they said, we don't need this. Well, that's not true with people who live in 4 and who live in 5. They do need this, but unless we have that equal voice, somebody is not going to be representing the values and the goals and the way that we in different districts may see how things should be on the Planning Commission. And as I said, whenever you have multiple segments from time to time, they will have competing needs. And this is the fairest way to see that everybody gets heard on the Planning Commission. Let me ask you, what is your concern?
Hold on. He still has the floor, so let him continue.
I'm happy to answer. My concern, a number of just unanswered questions and how this plays out in implementation. This is a policy that has worked in this town for a long, long time. I don't see how districting changes our necessity or creates a necessity to change the way we elect or appoint planning commissioners. And I just don't see, my concern is, in practice, I struggle to see how this is going to work well and not do anything but politicize our planning commission, the one place where we should have as much objectivity as absolutely possible. Vetting, if I'm going to nominate someone, I want 3 people to vote for that person. And I think the system as it works right now works just fine. I think my question still remains unanswered. How do we, at least in my own head, how do we achieve what is being discussed here if we don't have qualified people from a specific district, a council member can pick someone that they happen to like or thinks like them from any district in town. And I don't see now how that planning commissioner feels specifically beholden to that council member. I think there are a lot of pitfalls to this, and ultimately, I just want to hear what the other council members have to say about it.
Okay, well, let me address what you said to me first.
Hold
The
on.
three, well, he's talked to me. I would like to address what he has to say.
He answered a question.
Yes,
He
and
answered
then
a
he
question.
said
Ms.
some-
Lewis, he answered your question. We're going to go through our process, and you'll have a chance to respond, okay?
This is our chance to talk
I-
and debate.
and when you get
it's
there-
very difficult to talk
Ms. Lewis,
to somebody.
you do not have the floor.
I'm going to finish.
You do not have the floor.
I do have the floor.
You do
it's
not
very
have the floor.
difficult to talk to someone and have a discussion, an intelligent discussion, if you pose your concern and I'm trying to address it. So if you don't want to do that, we'll just go round and round.
Mr. Rick Sork.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Use this opportunity to make one quick comment. I'll call it, it's the agenda report. It's really more of a request. Nothing was done wrong. It really hits all the requirements of a report, but I would simply ask any of my fellow council members, if they're going to agendize something, perhaps to be a little more specific as what we are going to discuss. I spent the weekend, it just says recommended action, city council discuss council policy 302. So I spent the weekend going over the whole policy, not exactly sure what portions wanted to be discussed. I did find some portions that I was going to talk about, but apparently that's not of any interest to what the discussion is tonight. So I'm not going to waste anybody's time with that. I will address what has been brought up by the speakers and what has been discussed so far. It occurs to me that the Planning Commission, there are perhaps two ways of looking at the Planning Commission. Is it an advisory board that deals with land use, or is it meant to be a representative body, almost like an elected body, like the city council? And I'm listening to the arguments, and I'm hearing everything that's been said, and not to try to understand the rationale behind it, but I'm going to surmise that those who are in favor of going to sort of a one-for-one representation are more of the view that it is a representative body, and that it should be a one-for-one or mirror the city council directly. I'll tell you right up front that I'm actually not of that view. I view it as an advisory board that is made up of people with land use expertise that can advise, make decisions, and then advise us as an advisory board regarding those decisions. But that having been said, I want to also make a comment that even if it were a representative board, it's a little bit surprising to me, because I was here when we went to districting, and my recollection is, I won't speak for Councilman Federico since he wasn't on the council then, but I don't think there was a single one of us up here that thought districting was a good idea. I don't know if anybody now has come around to that view. I haven't. I still don't think it was a good idea, which makes me wonder, why would we then want to district our planning commission if we don't have to? So that's one thing that occurs to me, that if people feel that they don't have political representation with the planning commission, if a decision is made that they feel was political in nature, in that it was because they didn't have political representation on the planning commission, those decisions can be appealed to the representative body, which is us, the city council. I also want to note, and now that it's come up, I don't know the exact addresses of the planning commissioners. but it does occur to me, I do believe that there is at least one planning commissioner that does live in District 5, and I think there are 2 others that live in District 4. Now, if that's correct, I wonder if we adopt this, does that mean that we have to relieve one of the commissioners from District 4 when that comes up? I would assume so, or maybe that's the intent of this. So, you know, if it is meant to be a representative body, I mean, why don't we have direct election of the planning commission? I'm not advocating that, but if that's where we're going, it seems like that would make sense to advocate for that. In addition, if there's a concern that this commission doesn't adequately, or how should I say, from what I've heard, each district needs to have a representative so that everyone is adequately represented. Does that only apply to the planning commission? Or why doesn't it apply to all of our commissions? So it seems like it would make more sense to advocate that we, across the board, do it for all of our commissions. In other words, it's kind of an acknowledgement. I mean, the planning commission, yes, the other commissions, not so much. I don't know why. Maybe they're not as important. I don't think anyone's calling for the abolition of them if they're not important, but you know, that's something that occurs to me. Why aren't we calling for this across the board if there truly is a need or a benefit to having a representative from each district on our subcommissions, on our commissions and our boards? So that strikes me as we're not asking for that. We're not looking to do that. I don't think it would be wise in any event. So with that, I think you know where I stand. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. McSork. Mayor Pro Tem Wyatt.
Thank you, Mayor Miller. So I have first of all, I want to take the opportunity to thank Councilmember Lewis for bringing this to our attention and putting it on the agenda. This was definitely not on my radar anywhere that we should consider changing the way planning commissioners get appointed based on the fact that we're going to districting. But when I started to do my homework, I realized that it was on agenda. It was on the radar for a number of cities and a number of organizations. So, and for the very reason of changing the districting, it was felt potentially had a negative impact on the way these commissions were counted. So I wanted to make sure I thank her for at least bringing it up so we could discuss it and think about it and decide what the right thing to do was, because it could have just slid right on by and we would have missed something that might be very valuable. But getting into some of my homework, I started by trying to understand the charter of the Planning Commission for the city of Dana Point. And I don't actually know if there is one, but if there is, I couldn't find it. So I will look forward to see in the future if we can dig a little deeper. I found how to set their terms, how they got nominated, how they got appointed, and what their and how they were required to act, and et cetera. But I never could find what they were tasked with doing. On the city's website there, and this sort of comes back to address some of the things that have come up, there is a couple of paragraphs that that state generally what they do, and I will read some of that. It says, the Dana Point Planning Commission is a decision-making body tasked with reviewing matters relating to planning and development in the city. Typical projects reviewed by the Planning Commission include applications for new development, proposed changes in zoning or in the text of municipal code, as well as a review of proposed subdivisions of land. The Commission is also responsible for making recommendations to the council, such as whether a project or action is consistent with the general plan. So it's not, even from that general description, it's clear that it's not analyzing a project against the building codes or planning as the total entity of its charter. To try to get a better understanding, I went to the League of Cities and the Institute of Local Government, and et cetera. I'm going to read a few bits and pieces of that. So I will start by saying, what is a planning commission? Is a permanent committee made up of 5 or more individuals who have been appointed by the governing body, city council in our case, to review and act on matters related to planning and development. Most planning commissioners are lay people without any previous land use experience. So the idea that they somehow need to be land use experts or architects to set on it is generally we would find that that's probably not what the requirements and need for. Then I want to look to say basically what is it that these people do. So there's a couple things that came out of it that I thought were important. One is it provides a forum for reaching consensus, and it said this will provide the public with a sense of ownership over the plan. So this idea that you involve the public in planning and that the commission's job is to make that happen in a transparent way is an important part of the role. Second piece in this again is I'm reading from a planning commissioner's handbook published by the League of Cities. Connects people to the community. Planning ensures that architectural and aesthetic elements are incorporated into a project to connect people to their community and establish a sense of place. Again, these are relatively softer descriptions of need, which is the reason why I'm obviously you can all read this, but I'm picking and choosing. And then I'm going to read the duties, responsibility for a couple of sentences. First, it acts as an advisory board to the City Council on all planning and development issues. Second, the Commission assures that the general plan is implemented by reviewing development applications on a case-by-case basis. Third, the Commission functions as a decision-making body for many proposals. However, any Planning Commission action can be appealed to the City Council. So it brings in the element of establishing the plan, recommending the zoning, as well as overseeing its implementation on a project-by-project basis. That's a much broader charter than simply making a decision about how well of reviewing projects, which is where we normally see their function come up. And as a city, we have in one of our strategic things a need to update our general plan, which is not been updated for longer than advisable. And the Planning Commission, I would expect, would play a key role in working to help us do that. So the makeup of it in terms of generally who we are as a city and how we want to look at and a general plan moving forward is important. There's one other little section that sort of comes into the thing, which is the ethics of public service, and it says, as a planning commission yields considerable power over how your community grows and develops. With this power comes the expectation that you will hold yourself to the highest ethical standards. Part of being ethical means exercising your power in the public's interest as opposed to personal self-interest or other narrow private interest. It's easy to say. It's sometimes easier to do when you have a diversity of the people making it up because of the controversy. So anyway, I think those are important. I bring them up because I tried to understand the implications of what we were asking in the pluses and minuses. Now I have a whole bunch of questions that come out of that. So first of all, today, the commissioners can essentially are at large. They can live anywhere in a city, and they're essentially their nomination is approved by the council at large. If we were to change, the first question is: are we going to where a council member nominates? I'm going to say nominates versus appoints at this moment, because those in my mind are very different things. Nominates members. Now there's that decision about, does the member have to reside in the district of the council member, or can they be at large? Part of the discussion, and what the implications of both are, that we need to sort through. And then the second piece is it nominate versus appoint? Are we asking then that these are nominations, not appointments, meaning that they still have to be voted and agreed to by the council at whole? So then the question that came up, if we were to do this, what's the implementation? Is it similar to districting, where each time a term ends for a setting commissioner, that this takes place to replace that commissioner whose term is ending, which is, so we would have to work through the decision of that. And then secondly, they're appointed, but do they serve terms concurrent with the council member that appoints them? Meaning that when a new council member comes on, they can work to nominate, or do they essentially serve terms from when they're nominated, when they were brought on and nominated? So there's a lot of logistic problems to put this policy together that I don't think we are going to work our way all through tonight. And then secondly, can a council member essentially withdraw support from a candidate that they've nominated, or does the candidate, once nominated and approved, serve their term unless the majority of the council votes to make a change? There are a lot of details to change the policy that are important. Now the question is, why would we or wouldn't we make a change? It's not a trivial problem. Well, I think it comes back to the fact that
excuse me, Mr. White, are you advocating for any of those questions? In terms of, are you advocating for any of that they're going to run concurrently, or
no, I'm not. I'm actually, I actually think these are, I actually, my general advocation here is that we, if we decide to make a move, that we assign, ask staff to work through a policy with we give them some input and let them work through the details of a policy that we could come back to.
Okay, so this is more direction to the staff to answer some of these questions.
Yeah, these are the questions I think I want to bring up as a council, because if we were to do something, I believe we need to give direction to staff to go start to.
Okay, you asked a lot of questions, but I wasn't sure what we were going to do with those. So I just want to make sure we understand.
Yeah, understood. Thank you. So it comes back, and actually one of our public speakers brought this topic up today. The intention of districting was to give voice to minorities that might be underrepresented or not represented at all on our council. And the debate, the question is, does it work to do that as in every case or not? When we look at the city, that's still in my mind an open question as to whether, based on our demographics and and whether it will accomplish that or not. I guess my belief at the moment is I'm open to observe and decide as time moves along. But part of that, the Planning Commission as an advisor to the council in terms of setting land use policy and general plan, if you take the minority groups that are now represented, let's just say that, you know, the districting worked to perfection, and one of the districts now had a much allowed one of the minority groups to have a higher voice. If you cut them out of the planning commission so that they didn't have a voice in land use policy and the general plan and some of the zoning policies, you would dramatically diminish that voice. So I think that I think it's come up because of a recognition that fundamentally going to districting needs to ripple down through some of the other parts of the organization to make it as effective as it should be. And so this is one of those where I think that the effect that the Planning Commission could have on zoning ordinances, on the general plan, on specific plan, should get good representation from the various parts of the city and the minorities that might have a larger voice in those districts of the city. That's my general comment on it, I guess, as the first round of discussion.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem White. Ms. Lewis, I'm going to come back to you now, but just to explain why I was cutting you off, you had your chance to talk. The rest of us need a chance to express our opinions and thoughts as well. But now I'm going to come back to you to respond to Mr. Federico if you choose to.
Okay, well, I want to start first addressing that. Mr. Federico asked some questions. We were having a discussion. I noticed when Mr. Wyatt was talking, you had no problem cutting him off, asking him some questions, having a back and forth discussion, and that was fine. You didn't jump in and say, you didn't have the floor because you didn't. This is not the first time I have been treated differently on this council for 2 years from everybody else on this council. And other people from the public have come up and spoken about it, but I've not lent my voice to it because I really didn't want to get into it. But I think tonight made it very, very clear. You were just fine with having a back and forth to clarify something with another council member, which I had no objection to. And you were fine with Mr. Federico talking to me and having a back and forth. But when I posed one question, you jump in and stop me and silence me. I will no longer just sit here and say, that's fine, treat me differently. So I am now adding my voice to the many residents who ask me, how do I tolerate that? Well, I don't. So now I will get to the questions. I could support electing planning commissioners if that's what we want to do, and I could support just across the board. I think you mentioned that one, supporting something across the board. I can't read my notes here. I would address to you that in terms of the agenda report, I used the same agenda report. In fact, I specifically asked to use the same agenda report that the mayor had used when we were discussing Policy 201. So it didn't seem to be a problem when it was 201, but again, I put it on there, suddenly it's a problem. And I am going to note this each time from now on because I'm frankly quite sick of this. This is not an advisory board. This is a board. The Planning Commission is not an advisory board. It is a board that makes decisions that affect this city and the residents in this city for decades. And the decisions are often, and in fact, for the most part, irreversible. We put up Majestic, well, it's now Raintree. That's an irreversible decision. We have to live with that decision for decades. So this is not just some advisory board that says, oh, you know, that would look really nice there. What do you think? This is a very important, powerful board. And no one is saying that the qualifications should be changed. It's still going to be the same pool of applicants who come here. and we're still going to pick from the same pool of applicants. It's simply the implementation that who's is going to nominate. And I agree, Mr. Wyatt, with the word nominate. It is nominate. No one thinks it's a good idea that we had districts. In fact, I voted against districts, but here we're stuck with it. So the problem I see, and it's not just this board, this is a policy for years to come, is that if 3 people are picking all 5 members of the Planning Commission, those 3 people, in effect, are picking people who will make the decisions that those 3 people can agree with. And I think we had the example of the Planning Commission being fired, the entire Planning Commission, as someone noted, being fired when they did not grant the variance. And several of those planning commissioners, their terms had not expired, but they got fired, and we put in 5 new planning commissioners. Not me. That was a previous council. So that's the concern, is the tyranny of the majority silencing the minority. Whoever that majority is, there's always that risk, you know, and if it were you were the one in the minority and 3 other people were in the majority, it would work that way too. So the point is, we have districts. Districts have competing interests from time to time, and we need to respect that those districts need an equal voice. And for you to say that, well, it gets appealed to the city council. Well, if the 3 people who pick the 5 people in the planning commission are the 3 people that it's appealed to, I'm not sure really what we're talking about. It's like going to a judge. The judge doesn't rule in your favor, and so you appeal to that judge. It's not really much of an appeal. And I still did not get my question answered. All those opposed to it, what are you concerned about? If you want to make the planning commission political, what you do is you silence the majority by not giving them a fair voice. And a fair voice is simply their elected council member simply nominating somebody from the same pool, and the 3 people say, yes, we think that that person from that pool is qualified enough, and as Mr. Wyatt noted, many of the people who serve on these have no land use planning experience whatsoever. But it's very different for 3 people to deny somebody who is here standing before the council and has come here and submitted an application and been nominated than it is to simply just pick 5 people at random. So I see that as very different, and it will be much harder to just deny somebody without some sort of rationale versus picking 5 people, and now the minority is stuck with that. So for all of these reasons, I hope I've answered everybody's question. I don't want to get a back and forth with anybody because I don't want to upset the mayor here. But those are my reasons that I think this council needs to go the way of Costa Mesa, who went to districting and tried to be fair to all their residents and said, yeah, you know, now that we have a whole different look to our city, and that's why this policy has worked great. I wouldn't have changed this policy if we hadn't gone to districts. At large, this is fine because the 3 members of this council are accountable to all the voters, but that's not the case anymore. Something has changed, and so I am simply saying we had a major change. We should change the way probably the most powerful commission is appointed and elected, or you know, however you want to characterize it in this city. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lewis. I'm going to respond to your accusation that I treated you differently. However, that did not happen. I asked Mr. Wyatt for clarification. He had a bunch of questions, but he didn't direct them anywhere. I didn't discuss his question with him. I just asked where he would like those questions to be directed. In terms of interrupting you. Mr. Federico asked you a question. You responded to him. He responded to your response. He did not ask you another question. So you were not. It was not for you to respond to that. It was at that point to go to the rest of the council members. You jumped in. You did not have the floor. You were not recognized at that point. That's the difference. You were not treated differently. Okay. So
No.
okay, no, you don't agree with that. That's fine. You have your folks out here that are, I'm sure, going to be all over social media about this. But the fact of the matter is, you know, you did not have the floor. You just jumped in. You need to be recognized. Okay, I haven't spoken on this yet. There are a couple things that were brought up here tonight that are just factually incorrect. District 4 and 3 are the two districts that are going to have the majority of the development. It's Doheny Village is not in District 5; it's in District 3. So let's be very clear about that. We have two commissioners in District 4 right now. We have one in District 5. We have one in 1 and 1 in 2. District 3 is actually the one that doesn't have a commissioner. Okay. The other thing about firing the Planning Commission, we had them all reapply. 2 of them retained their seats. 1 of them chose not to apply, and 2 of them were replaced. So it wasn't a brand new Planning Commission. 3 out of the 5 were changed. 1 of them only because he didn't reapply. And secondly, that didn't happen before or after or before a reversal. And I'm only assuming that they were talking about the Majestic project. That happened before I was on council or Mr. Vixoric was on council. A different council overturned that decision. That was not this council. So let's get let's clarify the record on that. Now, I listened to all this about the nominations. How is this going to work? And you still need 3 votes of the council. And if the council, what if the three members of the council decide that your nomination isn't qualified for whatever reason? Then what do we do? We have narrowed down the pool to basically 5 members. I know people all over this community. Right now, we have a very well-diversified planning commission. It works extremely well. But I know people in District 4 that are very qualified to be on Planning Commission. I know people in District 5 qualified to be on Planning Commission. I know people virtually in every district in the city that are qualified to be on Planning Commission, but we don't get to hear from them unless they're nominated by a single member of the council. So this doesn't make a lot of sense to me. The idea that it's not going to be political, we just had a committee that was appointed by each member, and it was incredibly political. And it was dysfunctional, and it didn't serve the purpose that it was intended to serve. So, you know, to say that it's not going to be a political body is very difficult for me to grasp, especially when, you know, there are other members out there that may be very well qualified. Every one of our planning commissioners right now, by the way, has land use experience. Every one of them. We look at their resumes, we vet them out, and we ask them questions, and we select who we think will be a good planning commissioner for this community. Not based on what we think, based on their experience and how they're going to handle land use. They understand it. They're going to apply our zoning codes and are correctly. Okay. One other clarification I want to make is I believe only one of our planning commissioners lives behind gates. So, I mean, the idea that they all live behind gates and they think about things differently, I don't know where that came from, but I know one for sure, and I believe he's the only one that does. So, you know, at this point, I haven't heard a valid or a compelling reason to go ahead and do this. We were forced into districts by the courts. All right, the courts do not force your planning commission into districts. Why would we do that? The entire community was against districting. But we didn't really have a choice. We could have fought it, spent millions, and ended up in districts anyway. So I see no reason to go ahead and further divide our community up when it's still taking 3 votes to pick your commissioners. And so I guess I'm not in support of this right now. As written, it just doesn't make a lot of sense to me based on the experience we had with one of our other committees. So. With that, I'm going to go ahead and call for the vote.
I still have some comments.
I gave you your time. What now? What?
Yes.
Do you have anything new to add?
I do.
Okay, go ahead.
Well, thank you. Okay, so I want to speak to your comment. It sounds like you think that unlike the Financial Review Committee where the individual council member just picks someone. This is not how that is. It changed that to from the pool. So we're already picking from the pool of applicants, not just one person that we pick out of the residents. So you will still get to see the pool of applicants, vet them, do all the same things. It will just simply be a nomination from the council member. And when you characterize that the Planning Commission correctly decided, I think the people of Villa Verde would disagree with that. And that's where it comes to, okay, if the people of Villa Verde disagree and they can't vote now for anybody but one person, they have no recourse, no remedy. They can't go to their elected official and say, you know, we're not happy. This wasn't a good decision. So this is to give the voice equally to each of the commissioners. And I think that a policy could address Mr. Wyatt's concerns.
Okay. Mr. Wyatt, do you have more?
I do.
Okay.
So I have just a comment generally. This is where we as a council, this is a council meeting, right? This is the five of us discussing a topic that's of interest to, one or more of us and trying to figure out, what we want to do, where we want to go, whether, it's important or not. This is where we don't shine, I guess, as a council. We let too many external forces and feelings influence a good discussion. Right? This is a useful topic to have a good discussion on. Moving to districting and why we would change the Planning Commission appointment process related to it is because the people who might be most affected by a planning commission decision, especially on zoning and land use, less so that whether they followed the building code or not, but more on getting the building codes established and the land use plans approved, can no longer work to vote the council members who backed and put the planning commission in place out of office, because they can only vote to put the council member from their district out of office, if you will. And that council member may not have had anything to do with appointing that planning commission. So the reason why this sort of carries through is you've taken the residents' ability to react to a decision they disagree with and act on it away if they can't reach through to the appointment of the planning commission. I think that's a mistake. Again, this is an interesting topic to debate the pros and cons of, but that's sort of the heart of the matter. Political, not political, that always comes down to whether you agree or not, right? If what they're doing you agree with, it's not a political, if you don't agree, it's political. Ultimately, when you start to have public forums to establish a specific plan, or a public forum to update zoning ordinances, an example coming through on basically the likelihood of short-term rentals having to go through there when it comes back, and some of the other things, right? These have a political element to them because they change zoning ordinances that affect people's lives. I mean, ultimately, their property rights get changed. Either they get new ones they didn't have before, or they get ones they had taken away. So this is important. And I want to reiterate something I read earlier. This is not just an advisory board, right? It says, let me read the duties sort of again and reemphasize for the League of Cities, right? First, it acts as an advisory board to the main governing body, city council, et cetera, on planning and development issues. Second, and this is where you start to get away from that, ensures that the general plan is implemented by reviewing development applications on a case-by-case basis. And third, functions as a decision-making body for many proposals. Okay? So they go beyond advice, and they wield a lot of power, and rightfully so, to have that consistency of things. If the city council had to take on all of the planning commission role, it would be more than is reasonable to expect to happen, and we don't have the expertise for it to build up over time. So this is an important discussion to have. I would plead that we think about it and not get defensive in terms of reacting to it, but think about the implications of it and talk them through until we feel like we made a solid decision. And it's pretty easy to get caught up in whatever the social media says tomorrow. The social media will say tomorrow. I think it's useful to get input from our residents. I don't think it's useful for us to anticipate it and react to it even ahead of time. I think we should make the right decision. So I don't want to get too caught up in the back and forth of how things are done. I really want to get down to what's the right decision for the city to make, because this change or not will last a significant amount of time and has the potential of impacting a fair amount of the development going on in the city. So that's my
thank you,
final
Mr.
comment before we move forward.
Okay. So I'm going to make one last comment before I call the vote. And the one thing that you have to remember is whatever happens down on Planning Commission, the community always has a right to appeal it up to the council. There you have your elected who's going to make the arguments for you, and you don't know what the council's going to do. You saw it happen a few years back when a Planning Commission made a decision, it got appealed to the council, it got overturned. Okay, so you don't know what's going to go. Everybody's making these assumptions, just like they made assumptions at the last meeting that we're going to change policy 201. That was for discussion only. This was not for discussion, quite obviously. By social media, there were all kinds of information out there. They wanted a change. So I think that's what the question was about the policy, or about the staff report. But I think there's still avenues for people to get to the council, to get to the Planning Commission. But the Planning Commission should report to the community as a whole, not to an individual council member. That's their job. They look at the general plan. They look at our land use plans. That's their job, not for just what happens in their district. I think this is a bad idea. It takes us down a path that I think is detrimental to our community. And so the more I hear about it, the more I think about it, the more I just don't think it's a good idea for Dana Point. So we have a motion and a second. We need to take a vote. Madam Clerk, can we go ahead and vote?
Could I make a substitute motion?
Okay.
So I would like to move that we ask the staff to take the input from the discussion tonight and draft up a charter for the Planning Commission and an appointment process that includes some of the issues they brought up tonight, and bring it back to the council for consideration.
Okay.
I'll second that.
Okay. Do we have any discussion on that?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. So I agree that this is an important discussion, and I agree it's worth discussing. Unfortunately, I learned more about it from the emails that were sent in to the city clerk than I did from the staff report, and that's not a personal attack, Ms. Lewis. It's just, it was very thin, and there was no motion in there, no background, and this is the sort of thing you can't vote on without really asking lots of what if questions, right? I just don't know what direction we'd be giving to the staff. I think it's worth looking at, maybe options that we could come back and do. And I'd be interested, Mr. Denny, the sort of staff capacity to do something like this. And as the new guy, is this the sort of, is council policy the sort of thing that staff generally creates or does in a staff report?
Was that a question to?
Yes, Mr. City Manager, is this something the staff can do?
The staff could certainly research what other cities do and share that information with the council if that's helpful.
Do you accept that answer?
I accept that answer. No more questions.
I have
Okay,
comment.
Ms. Lewis?
So the direction is not just to look and see what other cities are doing, but to come up with a draft charter and implementation of putting people on the planning commission based on what you hear. Because maybe if we saw something and you could do, you know, the 3 people majority, but if we saw a policy that addressed all of these questions with respect to the change of the implementation, then that would be something concrete we could vote on. That's what I'm hearing from Mr. Wyatt.
Yes, my intent was to take some of the, basically, as I brought up, there's a number of open items that you would have to pin down to change the policy. And what I would like to see is, a policy that sort of addressed those to where the city and, and the city attorney felt that they were something that could be implemented and, et cetera. And then we have a choice between looking at the current policy and a policy by district and weighing and having another round of discussion of those two before we make a final decision. And that would be, in my view, that would give us more, based on the input, us more time to think through the implications, and also then we're looking to vote on very specific things, and yes, we might tweak some of those recommendations, but it would be very, as opposed to sort of this general yay or nay at this point.
And that was the motion I seconded.
Mr. McSort?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll be brief. As I mentioned earlier, I'm not in support of changing the policy, so I'm not in support of burdening the staff with work towards changing the policy. I'll be voting no on the Mayor Pro Tem's motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McSork. I've already stated my position that I don't support the change. I don't think having it written up and putting the staff through the process of writing it up is going to change my position. It still takes 3 votes. It's no different than what's going on today. If there's not a qualified candidate, you can go to a different district. It's the same thing we have today. This is about finding the best 5 candidates in the city. Shouldn't matter where they live. And so I just don't see the value in this, or I actually find it detrimental to our community. So I'm not going to be in support of it, but we'll go ahead and vote.
You want verbal voting then?
No, I got it.
Okay.
Mine shows it fails 3-2.
That is correct. There's a no vote by Councilmember Federico, Councilmember Vicsorik, and Mayor Muller.
Thank you. That brings us back to our original motion. We're ready to vote, and that motion was to change the policy. Could you read back the original motion, Madam Clerk? Ms. Lewis, if you would like to repeat your motion. We're back. We voted on that, so now we have to come back to the original motion.
The original motion was made by Deborah Lewis and Councilmember Wyatt, that each council member nominate a planning commissioner for council member approval at that point, but there was a lot more to it.
Well, it was from the pool of applicants.
Right.
So nominate from the pool of applicants,
So-
subject to the majority council approval.
Right.
Okay, let's go ahead and vote.
One more vote.
And that motion fails 3-2. Okay, so that brings us to council reports. Councilmember Federico?
Is this also council comments now?
Yes, it is.
So it's all in one,
Reports and
right?
comments, yes.
Speak once
Yep.
and
Yes, it is.
then let everyone go home. I do want to follow up on the comment you made, the opening of the meeting, Mr. Mayor, about meeting with OCTA and Doheny Village. I like to call the Capo Beach Commercial District. Really great meeting with them and a lot of stuff moving forward there. And I want to segue from that, some of the comments earlier to Mr. Mayor Pro Tem directing staff to work on this last agenda item. I feel like right now the capacity on the staff is something we have to be careful of. And I know they're working hard and planning on a land use plan for the Capo Beach Commercial District. We're going to be working hard on how to beautify it with the greater than $700,000 this council allocated for beautification in the short term over there. And we just approved earlier budgetary approvals for more contract building plan approvals. And I just think while it's something important, I'm not sure this is something we should go back and figure out the staff's capacity to do. And if not, we need to sit down and do it and put together some options if we think it's a good idea. But I certainly was not comfortable voting yes on that motion tonight, not knowing the capacity of the staff. And for Ms. Lewis, just not enough. This is too important to vote on a motion that I first heard tonight. So, anyway, my background on that. And I also would like to address some of the comments that that districting needs to be so divisive in that the Lantern District and Capo Beach don't have representation. I live closer to the Capo Beach Commercial District than the majority of people in 9264. I'm there almost every day. I shop down there. I get my car washed down there. I buy my wife's Bunny's rabbit food down there. I'm not ashamed to admit that publicly, although maybe I should be. And I work in the Lantern District, and I own property in the Lantern District, and I have a hard time keeping my conflicts in order. Thank you. Last meeting, Mr. City Attorney. I think we all care about these areas, and I think it's a false narrative that any one of us doesn't care about any of these areas or understand what they're about. So I really would love to move past the divisiveness part of districting and anything that might make things more divisive. I got a sense that maybe tonight, without knowing more about this 302 policy change, that it might actually add to divisiveness instead of take it away. And so, this council, I know each and every one of us up here cares about the district as a whole, the city as a whole, and their districts, and do our best by what we think is right for every resident. So that's all I have, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councilmember Federico. Councilmember Lewis? Nothing? Councilmember Vixorek?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have nothing to report. I've turned in my list of meetings to the clerk already.
Mayor Pro Tem White?
Well, I, just in general comments, I have turned in my list of meetings to the city clerk bright and early this morning to make sure she had them in time, right? I'm actually very encouraged to learn that there's some action being taken on the connectivity. It's been one of my topics that I have been beating the drum for quite a long time. So I'll keep beating the drum. You guys can move it forward. That would be fantastic. So I appreciate that. And I suppose I could be offended to, as one of the two at-large members, that I don't represent the town center or the Doheny Village, but I think I work closely with the people. I'm always available to listen to them and try to make sure I consider them. So I will choose not to be offended when they say they're not represented, and go out of my way to make sure that they know they are. That's all I have.
Thank you. Yeah, Mr. Federico kind of hit on something I mentioned it earlier in the meeting about the Doheny Village connectivity that we're currently investigating on how we can go about connecting the village down to Capo Beach. One of the other things that I want to report is I've been working with Assemblyman Bro's office. He met with State Lands and Coastal Commission, and the conversation turned to the loss of beaches down in Capo in the southern part of his district. And we're currently trying to set up a meeting with State Lands, State Parks, County Parks, Coastal Commission, and possibly Surfrider to start discussing what can we do about the loss of our coastal access. And come up with a plan on how we can go about guaranteeing continued public access to our beaches. That's going to be slow because, as you can imagine, with these different agencies, schedules are tough to coordinate. However, I'm confident we will get it done. Everybody's interested in this, so the whole idea that we don't care about other parts of the city is just. I'm not even sure how to describe how ridiculous that is. The very first thing I did was set up an account for Doheny Village and put $760,000 in it. That's not my district, but that's important to this community. Those beaches are important to this community. So majority of our focus right now is outside my district, quite frankly, on what's good for Dana Point. So all five of us care very deeply about this. I believe that every one of these council members cares as much about District 1 as they do about their own district, and every district as much as they do about their own district, because we all live here. Just because I drive across District 1 line doesn't mean I'm not in Dana Point anymore. I love this community. I want to see it do better. I want to see it become an even better community to live in, and we have some challenges to do that. And saying that my interest stops at my district line is not only ridiculous, it's absolutely offensive to me. That people think that's all we care about. That is not all we care about. So going forward, just so people know, and to address again what happened here tonight, we have procedures at the dais, all right? And everybody needs to follow them. In general, most people do. And when the policy is being violated, we're going to step in. We're going to follow the rules. And so I understand that some people don't like that. They see it very differently. There are going to be lots of accusations out there. But I assure you, what I'm going to be accused of is absolutely false. So with that, I'm going to stop my comments, and I have turned in my list of meetings. And so I will bring it to staff reports. Mr. Denny.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to make a point of introducing and welcoming Robert Sedita, our new Director of General Services, who is down there on the end there. Welcome, Robert. Welcome back to Dana Point, and we're really thrilled you're with us. So thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Munoz?
I don't have anything this evening.
Thank you. That brings us to adjournment, and the next regular meeting of the City Council will be March 5th, 2019 at 5 p.m. in the City Council chamber located at 33282 Golden Lantern, Suite 210, Dana Point, California. We're adjourned.